stream z Diablo 4, dawaj.
Also going to be recipes that are more generic and maybe are just generally good for the sorceress, but you'll be able to choose which one you think is going to be most powerful with the build you're making for your class.
To jest chyba, widzowie...
We're making a pretty radical change to the Codex of Power in this season, based again on the feedback that has been coming from our players.
Now, every single legendary in the game will be entered into your Codex of Power so that you can continually imprint the best possible version of that legendary onto your gear.
So going forward, there will no longer be carrying around all of these aspect crystals in your inventory. It's all going to be in the Codex of Power.
Ty w Diablo 4 teraz raz znajdziesz legendę, wrzucasz ją do legend, do Codex of
part of
Power
the final system that we have is going
to
to
każde
be
kolejne
greater
traci wartość?
affixes. What's a greater affix?
Czemu oni
Well, we
to
want to
robią?
keep it compelling that there are some drops that are even better than the others when you're trying to get the perfect build
Chyba
at
ogólnie była
endgame.
taka idea
Because of this, in World Tier
tych
4
legend
and only in
i
World Tier
Codex
4,
of Powera,
when an ancestral legendary item drops,
żeby
there's a
zbierać
chance
kolejne
the
elementy.
affixes on it can roll as greater affixes. These will roll with bigger values that are normally available for that affix.
Greater affixes
No
are
dokładnie, to będzie
fairly
jak stary
rare,
cube w
but
D3.
they're not impossible to find. While leveling up, you're going to be able to find upgrades much more easily with this new system.
Another part of itemization is going to be masterworking. Now, this is something really intended for that very high end game, again, World Tier 4. This is where a player is going to take an item, already has the affixes that they want on it, but now they go through a process of upgrading those affixes, getting even higher values on them.
Masterworking
Co ty
really
gadasz?
starts at level 100. Once you've
Stary, ale
already completed your
zajebisty
build and found some of the
crafting,
best items,
że
you're going to be able to test
bierzesz
your
przedmiot,
build against the powerful
kładziesz go do
enemies of the
kostki i
pit.
mu zwiększasz statystyki. Wow! Game changer totalny
Pit is a
craftingu.
new endgame system that has been added in this season that is going to challenge players that feel that they have largely maximized their build.
By pushing into more difficult tiers of the pit, you're going to be able to unlock rarer crafting materials to masterwork your gear even further.
You're gonna have to play some of the hardest content in the game, but once you do, if you're successful, you can go and make those affixes even stronger.
In Season 4, we're ramping the intensity of the Hell Tides through the inclusion of a variety of new activities, the first of which is a doubling down and rise of the cultists' presence throughout the tide. You're going to be running through the Hell Tide, seeing the cultists just conjuring up swarms and swarms of demons, adding to that sense of manic and chaos that
No nie wiem, czy
they're pretty well
20
known
mobów
for.
na ekranie to jest
The other
swarm.
archetype that we're adding is the presence of the Doomsayers, who were unfortunate enough to be caught out in the tide and basically just lost their minds to all of the mania going on around them. And lastly, rounding out the new activities are just the inclusion of the Iron Wolves. They're finally joining the fight. They could no longer stand in the sidelines, seeing the Hell Tides and Hell's forces intensify their assault on Sanctuary. As Season 4 players engage and progress through the Call of the Wolves seasonal activity, they'll earn
Ty, są
honor
dodane
with the
NPC
Iron
na
Wolves,
mapie, które
unlocking
strzelają.
access to a vast
Wow,
assortment of
ale game
rewards
changer.
to accompany and empower your Season 4 journeys. In the updated Helltide, for players who are able to stay alive long enough, they'll be paid a visit by the Hellborn, former heroes of Sanctuary who have aligned with the forces of Hell to attack the allies they once aligned with. Players who are able to take down the Hellborn will be acquiring the materials they need to engage with the new premier Helltide activity, the Accursed Rituals.
Patrz.
Located in the Helltide, these Accursed Rituals are pretty much just botched rituals from the cultists that players will be kickstarting for themselves, drawing the attention of all the nearby Helltide monsters in this kind of
Jezu, przecież
all-out
to już
battle.
kurwa było w tej grze.
One of my favorite
że ludzie
things for
stali
these
i
ambushes
klikali
is the
monolity,
Hellworm.
które
It's
respiły moby.
literally a giant hell slug beast that emerges from the ground and it spews out a whole bunch of mobs at you. If you're able to survive that, you'll be paid a visit from the Blood Maiden, our brand new Helltide mini-boss and one of the ultimate challenges in the new experience.
Przecież to
So I
jest
think
short.
I'm
To
actually
już
most
było w
excited
grze.
about this season because of what you're able to do with your old characters, how they can integrate with this new item game and take them to new
Ej,
levels of
może nie
power
robią
with this
jakiś
system.
challenge?
I think that the best part of this
Jak
update
dużo
is
kontentu
that
z
you're
gry
going
da
to
się
be really empowered
zrecyklować?
to build the character that you want to play. You're going to be able to pick custom affixes and enhance your character in a lot of new and interesting ways.
No dobra, zobaczmy, co tam mają do powiedzenia.
All right. We were just watching a video and
Literally
everyone
just finger gunning the screen for no reason.
Nie ma muszelki niestety, nic nie
Hey
powie
guys, how's it
ciekawego.
going? Welcome to another Diablo IV developer update live stream. My name is Adam Fletcher. I am the community director here for Diablo. I'm joined by this wonderful panel, plus an additional head, which we will call out. But
We only have 4 seats, so we have to swap people around as we go.
We have to do the same thing we did during the PTR stream, which was like we swapped out like Joe Shelley, and we put in Adam Jackson.
That's true, we did do
And
that.
so
Yeah,
we're gonna play more
Shelley.
magic tricks today. But do you guys want to do a quick intro?
Lead class designer,
to
lead
yourself,
live
to
game
the
designer,
Diablo IV?
game
Sure,
director,
I'm Joe
associate.
Buckmore. I'm the associate game director for Diablo 4.
And I'm Adam Jackson, the lead live class designer for Diablo 4.
And we have a new face.
Hello, I'm Colin Feiner. I'm the lead live game designer.
Awesome. And then we're actually going to be joined by
Who are you?
Derek.
Who are you?
Oh, well, I already introduced myself.
Adam
sorry,
Musarz, no.
because
I'm already screwing this up,
I
everybody.
know, terrible.
This is my first stream.
But we actually have Derek who will be joining us as well. Derek, you just saw in the video prior talking about season 4. He'll be swapping in to talk a little bit more about Helltides later in this. But big stream here. We have season 4 coming up. As you guys saw earlier this week, it is Loot Reborn for season 4, and a lot of players actually got to experience it a couple weeks ago with PTR. This was our first Diablo 4 PTR. It was a massive undertaking for the team here, but it was really,
Where is
really
the
great
man
to have
who
players jump in
said
early,
Hollow Knight is
check
an
out
ARPG?
season 4 and all the changes, and actually provide feedback. And so we have a lot to cover today based off of feedback that we received from players.
Feedback,
PTR
widzowie.
itself. So, but Joe, I know you wanted to jump into kind of talking a little bit more about season 4, how PTR went, before we jump into all the changes.
Yeah, happy to. So, okay, so last time we were on stream, we were actually talking about a lot of the changes that players are going to get a chance to check out on the PTR. So we think that went really, really well. It was even just having the week of time for players to like just jump in and just crush through all of the content, check out all of the new features, and get a lot of feedback, find a lot of bugs on the way as well. Was again super valuable. It's been really, really great for the team to be able to take a lot of this feedback, look at the tuning variety of features, and really make sure that we've got the best version of the season 4 experience ready when we get into the launch state. So in terms of like our big takeaways, first of all, really, really valuable across the board. Season 4, Season Loot Reborn was, as I mentioned during the PTR stream originally, was really our opportunity to go back and take a lot of the feedback in that we've been looking at since the launch of the game from 2023.
So Campfire to samo.
I do love the key art.
Fajnie, że jest feedback, używamy waszego feedbacku, staramy się naprawić grę.
So looking back at the thanks for disrupting my flow.
Kolejny sezon będzie nową podstawą do wprowadzenia zmian. Skrzynka, tak, no, cały czas pamiętamy o tej skrzynce, no, będzie wprowadzana, stary, po streamie, będzie kodowana skrzynka, no.
We made a change to the way the elemental resist worked.
Yep.
And there were a lot of things we had to do to make those changes like really shine through. There's like a lot of Paragon nodes that had to get updated. There were a lot of like legendary aspects that had to get changed. There was just a lot of itemization stuff in the background that we had to do to make those systems work better and lift up other things around them, like overpower, for example, to make that feel like it was in a better spot. So now that we're looking at, like, even when we were done that one big release for Season of Blood, we knew that there was a lot more that we wanted to do. Again, we've been thinking about, but there's a lot of work we need to do, like make sure that all of these things really all fit together cohesively. So, I mean, as people got a chance to see on the
Oni gadają
like,
to samo. Ja nie oglądałem chyba dwóch Camper chatów, to jest znowu to samo.
A little bit more in a minute. We get to like introduce these new like affixes into items.
Tak. Słuchajcie, są wprowadzone zmiany, no. Tak. Fajny feedback, super, słuchamy was.
Sort through 25 pairs of gloves in your inventory at any given time. You don't really have those same situations. We reduced the number of items that drop in the game experience overall, but made sure that the items that are dropping are just more valuable and more likely to be upgrades for you, or something you could kind of like build into an upgrade. We introduced the masterworking feature, right? And Colin helped head a lot of these things up, right, during working with the teams. So they introduced the masterworking feature where, players can continually upgrade items to increase the value of the affixes, and then, it ranks 4 and 8 and 12, you get to like kind of crit on one of these and make them even better. There's a lot of things that were introduced. We added the new content type in the form of the Pit of the Artificer. It's like this new, extremely deep and deadly dungeon dive players get to go into once they get into the, towards the end game when you're getting to 85, 90, your character level. You're starting to kind of dip into that space. And that's where
To
you go
jest
to
na
your
serio, czy to jest jakiś
materials,
sketch?
which
Nie,
feels
oni na
really, really
serio
good.
tak siadają, kurwa, co
And
2-3
we learned a lot of really
tygodnie.
great lessons from
I gadają
Greater
to samo
West and
co
Diablo 3.
tygodnie.
I think there was some really cool content there. So there's some really, really fun things there.
And
And then
then
also
also the Codex of Power updates. You no longer have to save all your legendaries all the time.
Codex of Power updates,
So
which I was
yeah,
like, to be
Ej,
fair,
sorry,
I've been
ale-
kind of, I've been so
Widzowie,
excited for the Codex of Power
wprowadzenie-
updates. I've been teasing it for like 6 live streams.
Codex of Powera w takiej formie,
before
że
BlizzCon, I feel like I teased it
jeżeli
in a live stream.
raz
So-
wydropisz daną legendę, to już jej dalej nie potrzebujesz, to jest cofnięcie się do Diablo 3. Cała idea tego Codex of Powera polegała na tym, że nawet jeżeli dropiłeś duplikat danej legendy, to byłeś w stanie ją ponownie użyć przy nowym itemie. I dokładnie na tej samej podstawie działa system, jak to się nazywa w tym? Nie w Lost Arku, ja zawsze mylę te nazwy. W Last Epochu Legendary Potentialu, który polega na tym, że nawet jeżeli wydropisz legendę, której teoretycznie nie potrzebujesz, a będzie miała wysoki Legendary Potential, to będziesz może ją w stanie zastosować. Oni nie rozumieją totalnie podstawy systemu, który ktoś kiedyś wymyślił i go zabijają. Oni nie wiedzą, jak go pociągnąć w stronę, w którą będzie bardziej interaktywny i ciekawszy i go usuwają, bo myślą, że ten system jest problemem. Ten system nie jest problemem. Problemem są pozostałe systemy zbudowane wokół itemizacji. No bo to będzie to samo, co w Diablo 3. Widzowie, co był warty w Diablo 3 piec The Furnace w momencie, gdy wydropiłeś drugi? Nic, kurwa. Ty chciałeś wydropić jeden, wsadzić go do kosmika na jego i całą resztę mieć w dupie totalnie. I oni robią teraz dokładnie to samo. Co oni robią? Jak był ten Codex of Power, czyli dropiłeś legendy, które miały jakiś unikalny afiks do niej przypisaną, no nie? I miałeś konkretnego tradera, który pozwalał ci wyciągać to i zapisywać sam Legendary Potential, żeby go włożyć do innego itemu. Teraz, jeżeli raz wyjmiesz Legendary Potential, to już masz go na zawsze. Więc każdy kolejny, który dropisz, jest bezwartościowy. To jest kurwa bez sensu.
Like, let's go back to like some of the goals that we had when we started like down on this, started some of the work for season 4. Now, we want to make sure that, first, players were having an easier time comparing items in their inventory. It's actually one of the first things we started thinking about when we began discussing what we thought needed to change about itemization, because the experience in Season 3 and Season 2 and other
Tak,
seasons
możesz go
has
jedynie
really
ulepszyć,
been,
jak ci
like, the
wypadnie
player,
lepszy.
you'll get into like the, you're running your
Ale
high
kurwa,
tier
te
nightmare
procent
dungeons. You're getting lots
nigdy
of
w
drops.
Legendary aspektach i nigdy w legendarnych
You'll have like items that are like,
elementach takich itemów nie chodzi o procenty w nich, a o ich efekt. To czy coś ci, wiesz, da 3 firebole zamiast jednego i zmniejszy ich damage o 18 czy 20%, to nie jest tak istotne. Mniej afiksów jeszcze będzie.
As opposed to having lots of really conditional affixes going back to like
właśnie
the,
ciekawe,
the
jakie
damage
to
on
będą.
Tuesdays joke, like that's like,
The shirt that
we want,
Mr.
literally wearing it now.
Not as funny if you
huge
see it
proponent.
out loud.
It's always funny. So it's obviously because it's a joke, right? Oh, jokes are always funny. But the truth is, like, we want to make sure that where we want to have conditional affixes
Powiem
in the
ci
game,
szczerze,
we want
że
to
te
find places
sezony
where
w
players
Diablo
will be
4
able
mam
to
wrażenie,
use them in a
to nie są
specific way.
sezony z dobrym contentem, tylko naprawienie gry. Stary, 4. sezon nie ma żadnej zawartości sezonowej. Żadnej.
And also, as a result of this, make it easier to compare those items. So one of the changes that we made is we actually reduced the number of affixes that can naturally roll on item slots. So like now, like, a rare item can roll like 2 affixes, a legendary item can roll 3 affixes. But then later on, there's other systems you get to introduce. We'll talk about in a bit.
Jezu, co oni kurwa naprawiają w tej
We
grze?
did that, so it's just easier to go through things.
Porównywanie przedmiotów jest problemem w grze, która ma kurwa zielone i czerwone strzałki. To są rzeczy, które są kurwa potrzebne w tej grze?
Yeah, which is super important because there's a lot of situations where like if you're level 100, like Blood Harvest might be a lot of fun, but Blood Harvest is still dropping like I power 900 items for you.
To
At
może
that
dobrze
point,
działać, jeśli te
why would you want
aspekty
to
wydobyte z
use
przedmiotów unikatów to będą te gówniane, a dorzucą unikatów, których nie można modyfikować, nie można z nich wyciągać aspektów, jedynie co to możesz sobie ulepszyć. Nie no, kurwa, musi być za każdym razem wartość podejmowania użycia jakiegoś przedmiotu, dropnięcie kolejnego przedmiotu. To miałoby sens, jeżeli w grze byłby trading. W tej grze nie ma tradingu. Jeżeli teraz wydropisz konkretny aspekt, każdy kolejny wydropiony jest dla ciebie totalnym uselessem. Nie masz żadnej wartości. Nie cieszysz się z tego dropu. Nie daje ci żadnego upgrade'u. Faktycznie inaczej by to wyglądało, jeżeli gra miałaby trading. No to wtedy nadal nabywasz pewną wartość, nie?
10 iPower 925 rings in a row, and you have stuff to play with then at that point.
A ten system sprawi, że każdy kolejny duplikat, który dropisz,
the high level changes we wanted to make
useless.
with items with regards to like making it easier to compare these things. Codex hits a lot, like the inventory concerns that we'd have. We made changes to gems in previous seasons, so we didn't have as many of them clogging up your inventory as well. So we thought that was really, really good stuff. But then we knew that we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about we weren't going to like add another tier of eye-powered items. That wasn't the way to make itemization more interesting for players and rewards more interesting. One of the core things I really wanted to focus on was the idea that like items have a journey, and the best items have a journey, right? So when you get a really good item, it's about what the potential of that item is. What you can do with this item to make it really superior, right?
Yeah.
Audio.
And that's
sort of,
to jump into tempering. One of the first features we had in terms of taking your item on a journey was this idea that we wanted hundreds of different assets, and each one spoke differently to the build. We wanted you to be able to play sort of whatever class you open and have in mind and manifest that through customization of your item. So we actually have some video, I think, of what the
nie ogarnęło się.
So here you have, we're adding an offensive affix to the item. It's going to land on increased corpse explosion damage. It's like, yeah, that's pretty cool, especially if you really like corpse explosion. We've added a skip button so you can skip through the flow if you really want to blast through this. We also have a results screen now that shows you exactly what affix it landed on and what the roll range was.
Jezu, często deal kurwa damage, często deal damage.
Here, for example, chance to cast Bone Spear projectiles twice, which I know, Adam, is your favorite.
Oh yes, I love more.
Ale czemu to jest kurwa szansa na to, że ty Bone Speara skastujesz 2 razy? Zamiast po prostu twój Bone Spear kastuje się 2 razy, ja tego nie rozumiem, kurwa. Oni się śmieją z tego, że mieli damage on kurwa Tuesdays. A kurwa nadal wprowadzają system Legendary kurwa jakichś aspektów na broniach, który ma 20% szans, że gdy skasujesz Bone Speara, to będzie on podwójny. No Jezu, kurwa!
Is that like the manuals that we're introducing initially are just like the beginning.
Siema, Mando, dzięki za ostatnio, cześć widzowie. Kurwa, i to jest tak głupie. Oni gadają non-stop po pewnym problemie i nadal nie rozumieją, że to jest problem. Dzięki Lazy za Prime, dzięki Dotray za 16 miesiąc, dzięki Pinek za drugi. Serio, powiedz mi, czemu by to miało być problematyczne w Diablo 4, że nagle byś dostawał upgrade broni, który by ci sprawiał, że twój Bone Spear jest teraz podwójny. Kurwa, nie wiem. Fan by był jakiś w grze może upgrade'owania tego? Że nagle byś upgrade'ował item i byś czuł spory przyrost mocy, kurwa? Nie, trzeba dać 20% szans na to, że gdy kastujesz Bone Speara, to będzie podwójny. Ja pierdolę.
Sure, yeah. So, the next step in your item's journey is to really take it to new heights. You've customized it, you found some base affixes you're really into, and we wanted to give you a way to essentially take some of these affixes to new levels. So you think about helms and CDR or cooldown reduction, or for example, that chance to replicate, your Bone Spear. We want you to be able to really juice those stats. So I think we have a video here of what that looks like. Overall, what we've really done is taken a look at the feedback. We got a bunch of feedback that it was tedious to upgrade these over and over.
Jezu, kurwa. Ale zajebistą rzecz widzę, pokazują. Możesz włożyć broń do kowala i zwiększyć jej statystyki o 5%.
Sort of in the spirit of blasting across everything that we do, so you can do that very quickly. Another piece of feedback that we got was
Nie no,
that,
kurwa,
you know,
geniusze
part of the
itemizacji
master
to są.
process allows you to
Ja
reset this.
pierdolę.
Why do you want to reset this? It's because you want to hit that specific affix you're looking for. You want to juice a specific affix, and sometimes you might miss.
No nie no,
Which means
crafting
you wanna
kurwa
reset that item.
reimagined.
So part of the resetting sort of requires you to get lower tier materials. You're going to get these from the pit. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Last
But
Epoch
overall,
wziął
we saw a bunch of
wszystkie,
feedback that was really
znaczy
tedious
kurwa
to
ma
create, like, 1000
bardzo
caches
dużo
and open up,
podobnych
in town, like,
systemów
all the time.
craftingu i itemizacji do Diablo 4 i pokazuje jak one wyglądają w praktyce, gdy wiesz jak je zastosować w grze. A Diablo 4 zlizuje kurwa spuchę z podłogi, no taka jest kurwa prawda. Nie no, oni kurwa, no, chłopy robią kurwa nowy... Nie, dla mnie to jest kurwa patola jakaś totalna. Śmieją się z damage'ów kurwa w czwartki, wprowadzają nowy system, masz procentową szansę, że skill stary będzie podwojony.
Changes coming for masterworking based off of feedback. Masterworking, of course, being a brand new
nowy system optimizacji. Możesz wziąć przedmiot i zwiększyć w nim wszystkie afiksy o 20%. Wow! O kurwa! W życiu nie czułem takiej kurwa dopaminy zmieniając item w hack and slashu, w życiu.
We did, and I can totally talk about some of the stuff we've done just overall on itemization. The Veiled Crystals is one of those things.
Ci ludzie nie grają w hack and slashu, to jest problem. Kurwa, oni nie rozumieją tego. Jak można mieć całą ekipę robiąc hack and slasha w Blizzardzie Diablo 4, gdzie kurwa nikt nie rozumie podstaw itemizacji? Ile kurwa sezonów oni potrzebują, żeby nauczyć się grać kurwa w hack and slasha? No serio, no kurwa wystarczyło zagrać w jednego hack and slasha z dobrze zrobioną itemizacją, żeby to zrozumieć.
Diminish our overall goal of trying to reduce that sort of sifting through sand feeling, right? So in the meantime, you know, they can be salvaged. They still have a use in the end game. But we heard a ton of feedback, to your point, Adam.
Feedback, yes, feedback.
It's just like such a bottleneck, and it's like, God damn it, I have to pick a bunch of like yellow items up to do any of the cool crafting features. What the hell, Blizzard?
That's an actual player quote too.
I'm
very sure it was.
Yeah. So what we've done is we've made it so that legendaries break down into equal amounts of veiled crystals. So you can just not pick up yellow items. It's just a bonus now. We've also made sacred and ancestral items break down into 2 and 3 amounts of salvage. So sacred items will break down into double, ancestral will break down in triple. So we're effectively tripling the output of a lot of the salvage here.
And I know, that was probably the most vocal feedback that we got from players. About,
maybe a little bit.
Yeah, like, I need more veiled crystals. So I know that there's changes coming for that in Season 4 based off that PTR feedback. Another, probably maybe the second, maybe also the first.
Dzięki Valve teraz to 4. miesiąc. Dzięki Daniel za 10. miesiąc na 3. poziomie.
Affixes and the visibility related to those. So there are changes going into that for Season 4. So, Colin, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we wanted, you know, the dopamine. That was a big goal also of part of itemization, is just like seeing an item hit the ground and just being like, oh, I like that jackpot moment, right?
So that's really important.
So we actually have some video here to show of what that actually looks like on the ground. So you can see, here's the weirdly long named item with the greater affix. Yeah, right.
Unyielding Commander's sacrificial sickle.
I know, right? So we have a 1 greater affix star. It'll go up to 3 or 4 if it's a unique item, which always feels incredible. So it shows up on the ground when it lands. And then if we can go to the next video, we actually have an indicator now when it is in the inventory.
So you can see it.
Right.
I asked this as a joke, and it looks so good.
No, gdy działa ci cooldown, twoje szkielety zadają więcej damage'a.
So that's been enormously helpful and really, you know, when you kill like Duriel or one of these tormented bosses,
giga mocno nie rozumieją tego chyba, z czego się nawet śmieją.
Stars on them, and it just is a feel great moment.
Kind of goes with the whole like not sifting through the sands. You clearly see that icon, you know that has value to you.
You want to know what's valuable.
Exactly, especially, and again, even on the icon itself, like in your inventory, you'll immediately know those are my greater
Nie no, giga kurwa dobra zmiana, widzowie.
long gone are the days of the Roman numeral.
Pojawia się ikonka w ekwipunku na przedmiocie, jak leży na ziemi. Lud filtry, nie widzę, kurwa was. Zamykam oczy, nie istnieją.
We had a few jokes about that, but I know...
One thing I want to touch on real quick before I move on to itemization, if that's okay, is we actually, to touch on the veiled crystals, I think players are going to want to know this, is we reduced the imprinting cost of aspects quite a bit. So that's really going to help the veiled crystals as well. I think it went from like 75 veiled crystals to imprint on an ancestral armor to 16. So it's a pretty huge swing. You're just getting way more of your aspects on gear. It's a lot more flexible.
We really want people to feel like, and this is kind of the Codex of Power updates in general, which I'm really pumped about, is we want you to feel like you're able to re-imprint those aspects and that it's something that you're not having a huge cost or huge barriers to doing, right? Because as you upgrade your gear, that should be part of your process. Is like
Czyli teraz nawet wrzucanie tych Legendary Powerów nie będzie miało żadnego kosztu resource'a. Z 75 krystali zeszli do 16, okej. Kurwa, może niech to dadzą już po prostu w ogóle w plecaku, co wy na to? Że startujesz je wszystkie masz. Albo w Battle Passie niech to dadzą. Jak kupisz Battle Passa, to dostajesz Legendary Powery wszystkie.
Oh, that's a
yeah, that's true. The fail chance we took. Funny enough, that was like probably the biggest thing changed.
That was the first bullet, and I somehow missed it. Yeah. So we definitely felt like there's a ton of feedback that the double random chance was just a little bit too much, and we agreed. So we just took it out. It's just fun now. Just upgrade the item. We adjusted the material costs a bit, but the fail chance is no longer there.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Colin, for going through those changes. We'll actually be back to Colin later.
Dalej robią to Sezon, mówiłem, że nie będą robić. Gra staje się jeszcze bardziej casualowa. Levelowanie było nudne, co robią? Przyspieszają levelowanie. Zbieranie aspektów było nudne, co robią? Sprawiają, że zbierasz aspekty szybciej. Imprintowanie aspektów na broniach wymagało resursów, co robią? Zmniejszają koszt resursów. Zamiast zastanowić się, co można zrobić, żeby ta droga była ciekawa, to oni skracają drogę, żebyś szybciej doszedł do mety.
Yes, I love my slides. We have kind of 3 categories of things that I'm going to be talking about today. Again, thanks to everybody for playing on the PTR. We did get a ton of feedback. I'm not going to go over the specifics of everything that changed, but I'm going to go over kind of the categories of things just because there's a whole lot of changes. One of the first big ones was endgame survivability issues. So this is kind of talking about those people that went really far into the pit, and this is kind of something that's been happening on live as well that we wanted to address. And there's this phenomenon when you get really deep into the game and you're fighting high-level monsters where you'll hit a point where the monsters are kind of easy and you're able to blow through with your really powerful builds, and then you kind of get to a point where they start one-shotting you. And it can be kind of mysterious and hard to understand, like, what's going on, why did this happen? We've also had some issues balancing that kind of top-end survivability when you get to those hard monsters in the game. One of the reasons for this is that variability in player defensiveness has been really high traditionally. This is why when you look at the new items in the game in Season 4, you don't see a damage reduction very much at all. It's a very premium stat now that's really hard to get. And it's to help solve this problem of when someone is stacking all damage reduction versus someone who has none of it, their difference in effective health and survivability is really, really high. And so it makes it hard to balance the game. Another part that we wanted to hit was really armor. That armor is kind of a really confusing stat. It's not really well understood how it works. I'm going to be going over how it works and what we're changing.
Że ktoś stakuje redukcję damage'u, to ma więcej effective health'a, no chyba to kurwa logiczne jest, czy nie? I przez tym się ciężko balansuje grę?
You can juice them with masterworking and crit them and all these things. And it allowed for some really crazy things on the PTR. People love to post constantly at me. And
Kto by się kurwa spodziewał?
Crazy things, it's awesome to get powerful and have that fantasy. We do have to take into account things like combat clarity and computer performance to make
sure the game can still armor, jest jakiś dodge w grze, są różne typy damage'a.
You mean it's not fun to just not see the screen or the ground?
I think it is for a little while. Like, it is hilarious, I think.
Yeah, it's funny for a bit.
Some stats can get very high, allowing for crazy things. We like crazy things, but we have to take computer performance into account. Co to jest za kurwa bullshit?
Balance changes and bug fixes. I'll be going over some of them, but there's way more than what I'm covering
Co im
right now
kurwa
today.
silnik nie wyrabia kalkulując to, czyli są jaja.
A lot of feedback on bugs. There were a lot of them that were reported, and we acted on a lot of them. I'll give an example of some that we did. All right, so let's go into armor. So, brief history lesson or description of how armor works today. This is like when you log in, how armor is functioning. It's your stat for physical damage mitigation. So you know how you have your elemental resistance that caps at 75 and then can get pushed up a little bit. Armor reduces your physical resistance up to a cap of 85%. It can't go higher than that. That's the number. But what's confusing is the amount of armor that you need to get to that 85% cap is actually based on the level of the monster that you're fighting. And I gave some examples here. These are the actual numbers in the game. So if you have a level 50 monster that's hitting you, whacking you, then you need 5,265 armor, and then you'll be at that 85% cap. But then at level 100, at every level, like 51, 52, 53, that number is going up of what you need. And at level 100, it's about 9,230, and then at level 150 monster, it gets close to 13,000, right? And so what this ends up, kind of creating is that the player really never knows when they're done with armor, right? That number can scale up forever. It's kind of a hidden system under the hood. So when you're fighting these monsters, and they get way higher level than you as you scale into the pit or nightmare dungeons or whatever, you don't really know how much you need. And so this is kind of really contributing to that phenomenon where you're fine, you're at the cap, and then the higher level monsters just start one-shotting you. So in Season 4, a lot of it's going to be the same as Season 3. It's still going to be the cap is still going to be 85%, and you're still going to need escalating amounts of armor as the monster level gets higher. But what we're changing here, if we go forward a little bit, is that armor is now going to cap at that level 100 monster number. So that 9,230, you can write down this number. We're also going to later get into the tooltip. We couldn't get it in for the launch of Season 4, but we'll have it soon after. But it's kind of going to be like elemental resistance, where you get to this number, and then you're kind of done with the system, right? So armor is just another thing on your checkbox of things you want to do as far as defensive survivability, and once you get it, you're done. You can get it from gear, legendary aspects, and so on. Particularly in Season 4, I think this will be a little bit of an easy number to hit. We're not trying to make this super difficult or hard to do. It'll be very achievable for you when you're a level 100 player. So here we have a zoom in on the tooltip so you can see this player has way above that 9,000 amount of armor that they need.
Nie było łatwiej przypisać po prostu armoru do poziomu twojej postaci, jeżeli chcieli finalnie po prostu to osiągnąć? Bo kurwa tak to działa na przykład w WoWie, w innej grze, którą sami kurwa wydali.
So next, stat caps. So, now that we've introduced a lot of ways to get really high amounts of stats in the game, we want to kind of control for visual clarity, what a player can put onto their screen. So kind of similar to some caps we have already in the game, like attack speed or elemental resistance, we're putting some caps on cooldown reduction and the increased area size. It's really fun to get those giant frost novas that come to the screen, but when it goes like 2 or 3 screens away, it can get really noisy and messy. So we still want these stats to be really powerful and impactful, but just control a little bit the amount of insanity that they can bring. And one thing on this cooldown reduction cap, to be clear, this is not just CDR across the entire game. This is just capping what you can get from gear. So this is like the base cooldown reduction you get when you first cast the skill, what it's going to be. You can still get cooldown resets or additional cooldown effects from things like the skill tree or legendary powers that just reduce the cooldown of your skills as you do certain mechanics. This is just like the baseline cap that comes from your gear.
I think when we looked at the cap for area effect too, we tested it on Frost Nova and we were pretty meticulous on what that cap should be, and it was still massive.
No, it's huge, yeah. When I say we're making a cap, you're still going to get to insanity when it comes to what's on your screen. It's still going to be awesome. So you can see here, this is just showing you what the tooltip looks like now. So we're going to be showing you, as a player, what those caps are, so when you're evaluating your gear on your tooltips, what it is. And then same thing here, you can see here, like the dust level area effect size bonus, it caps at 100%. Next, balance updates. So again, like I mentioned before, we made a lot of balance changes based on feedback. Again, thank you for
dodają do gry kapy, kurwa, ale
over some of the things. One of the bigger categories
po co dodawać do takich znaczy są elementy w hack and slashu, które wymagają kapu. Jak na przykład resy, armor czy inne tego typu bzdury. Ale po co dodawać cap do efektów na broniach?
Again, to be clear, you're still going to spawn a whole lot. It's just not going to be like insane amounts where you can't see things anymore. They're still going to be very powerful. I'm even going to show a video a little bit later of kind of the difference of PTR to what's going to ship in the game. Some other things though that we're doing, fortify. We wanted to increase the amount of damage reduction that you get. This is just fortify across the board, the base mechanic. That DR is going from 10 to 15%. And this was because before, when it was at 10%, we had to take into account that players could get damage reduction from a million different sources throughout the game. Now that it's more rare and more premium, we can actually make this mechanic in the game a little bit more impactful and feel like you're a tankier player for opting into this, these kinds of builds. We also made a lot of tempering affix updates. I'm not going to go into detail them, but just know like what you saw in PTR and what's going to ship, you're going to see a lot of improvements, a lot of balance changes, even some shuffling around of the affixes to make them in ways that make more sense based on feedback. And then we did do some class changes as well. I'm only going to give very few examples here, but just know that there were quite a few. One is Druid players. Companion Druid players always harass me. They want that build to work, and I agree. It's really cool. So we increased our Druid, the health of Druid wolves by 200%, and we also reduced the respawn rate. So, we got feedback basically that, their companions were really good and fun and did damage, but in the late game, they just kind of died and couldn't survive. So we're doing this to kind of address that feedback. All right, so here's Dust Devils as an example. So you can see on the left, this is just one barbarian by themselves, the amount of Dust Devils that they could produce, right? And then on the right, you can see kind of the same barbarian. You can see like the Dust Devils around the areas where the enemies are, they're still getting hit by a ton of them, but it's not covering the entire screen, right? And especially when you get like 3, 4, many players together, it really becomes insanity.
Nie no kurwa, to co jest po lewej powinno być osiągalne, ale powinno mieć jakiś kurewsko wysoki sufit. Tak samo jak w PoE działają takie
and other
buildy.
classes could do that kind of thing too, not just Barb, but this was kind of a good example. So, this is kind of seeing the difference between.
Powinieneś mieć możliwość zrobienia czegoś takiego, ale to nie powinno być low effortem.
This is another one of our new uniques that rogue players gave us a lot of feedback on. So a quick summary of how this unique works is it kind of changes your rapid fire skill from shooting straight and hitting a single enemy into kind of a mortar skill where you shoot up into the air and then your arrows fall on the ground and explode. It's really, really cool, but one of the pieces of feedback we got was that when you launched the arrows, they would kind of go in a line and they wouldn't all hit the same enemy anymore. So if you were trying to do single target damage, it could actually be a nerf unless you like walked right up to the enemies and shotgunned them. And while there was a way to play around it, players weren't really happy that like we transformed the skill so much that it went from a range skill to kind of a melee skill. So we made an update here, and we have a video of the before and after. But basically, you see on the PTR on the left here how it goes in a big line, and then the player has to run right next to the target dummy to do the full damage to it. And on the right now, you'll see basically you target where those arrows are going to drop, and they just all go to that area. So you can hit a single enemy, but you'll also hit all the enemies around it because the arrows explode. So it should be a lot more usable compared to before.
Przecież wystarczy,
ricochet with my rapid fire?
I'm
żeby
pretty
to
sure
było
yes,
przypisane
it can. So it does
do...
all the things and inherits all the things that your rapid fire.
Kurwa, tego samego, do czego są na przykład zęby przypisane w Diablo
I'm
2.
pretty sure it
I
can.
do położenia
Like
twojego
everything
kursora.
else. Yes. Spam everywhere. We love spam. And last but not least, bug fixes. Like I mentioned before, there were a whole lot of bug fixes reported to us. Thank
Oni
you all
rzeczy
for getting
naprawiają
them.
w taki
We addressed
sposób,
pretty much every single one that was
naokoło,
reported. I'm giving
że
some
od razu
examples
jesteś w
here,
stanie
but again, we
zauważyć,
got
że
a
oni to
lot
źle
more than what I'm
naprawiają.
showing on the screen. One was Druid's Hurricane was incorrectly scaling damage basically infinitely, so we fixed that. Ebon Piercer, the extra missiles from our new unique, they incorrectly had 100% lucky hit chance, which is
Wystarczyło
prompting
zrobić na
a lot of
przykład
crazy stuff.
trigger
And
na
then
skillu.
Flame Weaver, another one of the new
Masz
things
on and
introduced
off.
to the game.
Leci
It's
tam, gdzie
basically an
leci,
effect where
gdzie
you
masz
can put a
kursor,
firewall on the
albo
ground,
leci
and then you shoot
kaskadowo.
firebolts through it, and it'll split the firebolts. Really cool fantasy. But what happened in the PTR was you could stack
Miał
them
być
as the
jeden do
firebolts right
clearowania
on top of
mapek,
each other,
drugi
and
na
they would
bossa,
split
nie?
the firebolts multiplicatively and add more and more, way more than intended. So you could fire a ridiculous number of firebolts, which were crashing servers and things. So it wasn't
Albo
great.
sprawić, że
But now we
gdy z
fixed
shiftem
that, so it'll
używasz
work
skilla,
properly.
to będzie leciał w miejsce
And
kursora.
again, we're still discovering and working on other fixes. There were a lot more that went in. If you reported it, it was very likely fixed. So basically, the build will be in a much better stable state once we launch, and that's really due to all your feedback. So thanks again. And yeah,
Awesome.
that's my section. So.
A lot of changes coming to classes. Class balance feedback we got from PTR was really, really great. You know, we were able to make so many different changes there. Of course, some of the biggest ones like the readability stuff that we probably saw. Seeing the initial videos of like the Dust Devils everywhere was was crazy. Also being in a party with like I was playing PTR and being in a party with like two barbs and like another like necromancer. I was like, oh okay, like what's going on right now?
PTR is one of those things you get to see things in development state.
Siedzi na lajcie, bo to jest lead season designer. A 4. sezon nie ma nic powiązanego z sezonami. To myślisz sobie, kurwa, ale co, nie? Miałem zaprojektować 4. sezon, nie zaprojektowałem i właśnie przyszedłem go przedstawić. Skoro jest dedykowana osoba do tworzenia sezonu, to czemu nie ma sezonu, kurwa?
Derek is actually going to talk a little bit about, of course, all the immense Helltide changes. Probably one of the most popular features and changes that we've introduced in Season 4 with PTR and people being able to experience it. Of course, we got feedback based off of players jumping into Helltide, and we do want to go through all that with Derek. And then we also want to talk a little bit about the season itself with Derek. So, Derek, want to jump in?
Yeah, just a few things to cover. So as you mentioned, the players who joined us when the PTR or caught all the various like blog and video posts and whatnot know that with Season 4, we're introducing permanent upgrades to the Helltide experience. Heavy focus on improving and enhancing, I guess, monster density and activity variety. So there's tons more things to do in the Helltides, and as a result, there's just ton more monsters to, mow through in the
Po czym pokazują gameplay, gdzie jest kurwa 6 mobów na ekranie. No ja pierdolę, co to jest za clown fiesta?
Across both the seasonal and eternal realms, so they're not going away once season 4
ends. Od 4 sezonów zwiększają moby density.
Or item updates too, right?
Yeah, now and
This
forever.
is the new world we live in.
Yeah, this is Sanctuary. But there's also, if you kind of look at the top right of the screen, the threat system. So the longer you're fighting in the tides, you're going to be accumulating threat, which just results in even more monsters ambushing you at higher frequencies than monster packs. I think the personal favorite, and like fan favorite, is the Hellworm. This giant demon slug bug that just pops up from the ground and just vomits monsters all over you.
A nie co sezon pierdolisz o tym, czy z
Kind
mob
of with all
density.
those, the seasons, as we say a lot, are an amazing opportunity for experimentation. And sometimes the best results of those experimentations are when they can inspire permanent upgrades and just enhancements to the base game as a whole. So that's where the Hellborn and the new Cursed Ritual and Blood Maiden come into play as part of the new Helltide experience. Yeah, look at those. Those look rad. So the Hellborn, as our Season 2 players might recall, we introduced the Bloodseekers. And those were really cool monsters based on class archetypes. So you're kind of like fighting vampiric shadow versions of yourself. And we take a look at that content, and we just love it from like the team perspective. Just find like, hey, we're upgrading the Helltides. This is a perfect piece of content to just include with it. So that's where the Hellborn came into play.
Ale to już było, kurwa, chyba, nie? Mi się wydaje, że były walki z klasami postaci, nie? Też mi się wydaje, było, kurwa, czy nie?
Cursed Ritual and the Blood Maiden. In Season 2, with the Bloodlures and the Bloodseekers, we introduced this concept of, I guess, calling it just like open world social boss summoning. We followed up with like there's a buzz right there.
Yeah, it's very catchy.
Rolls right off the tongue. I love it.
Again, to my designer speak sometimes, but and we followed that up with like the Malphite spawners in Season 3, and again looking at these really successful experimentations from previous seasons, we love opportunities to bring players together and just add that extra layer
Diablo
to the
2 ma
Helltide
tak
experience. So
piękną
that's
kulę
where
mrozu.
the Cursed Ritual comes into play. So as you're out fighting against the tides, you'll be collecting the new material.
Czy mi się wydaje, że ta gra kurwa graficznie wygląda gorzej niż wcześniej?
To summon up the Blood Maiden, and you can do this, by yourself, or you can partner up with some buddies and all, I guess, contribute to the summoning together. And the Blood Maiden itself is our new Helltide mini boss. That she's immensely powerful, but also
Nowym mini
very,
bossem
very
jest
lucrative.
jak coś kurwa przeciwnik z bety.
Forgot to mention is that this is all expanding into World Tiers 1 and 2 as well, and kind of like a distilled, not diluted. So the Helltide in World Tier 1 and 2 is more specifically tuned to, I guess like meet the leveling needs, or the needs of the leveling player.
Awesome. On the Blood Maiden, I remember you had talked about with me before that the people that summon the Blood Maiden actually get bonus loot drops, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can either contribute just by yourself to the Blood Maiden and get some extra loot for your troubles. We want to make sure that we give you a little bit extra because you're sacrificing up your hearts. But also, every player that it doesn't stack, so you're not stressed to say, hey, I just need to be the one that summons them all. We can all party up and just deposit our own baneful hearts and I guess reap the benefits of that.
Yeah. Right. To be clear, so if you put in all 3, you get bonus loot, right?
Correct.
But like you, me, and Colin are in a group, and like I put in 2 and you put in 1, do I get more loot than you?
No. So you get the same amount of loot. So if Colin has a baneful heart to deposit, if we all dump them in together, then we all get the shared benefits of that.
Got it.
But I will touch on a bit later the PTR updates and just some of the enhanced value that the Blood
Czemu
Maiden
możesz dostać
receives
bonus
since
lutu,
PTR
jak w
for both
takim razie
contributors
więcej
and
wkładasz?
non-contributors to the summon.
Awesome. Yeah, so a lot of new stuff coming in for Helltide, and this is all part of the stuff that players got to experience in the PTR. And of course, we got learnings from the PTR, as you just mentioned.
Many.
Do you want to walk us through some of the changes that are coming in with Helltide for all the PTR feedback that we had?
Yeah, I think I have a PowerPoint on my own.
Ooh,
there you go. Look at that.
Oni cały czas gadają o tych Helltide'ach i cały czas co sezon te Helltide'y trzeba naprawiać, nie? Oni kochają ideę Helltide'ów i cały czas z Helltide'ami jest problem, nie?
A little bit too far in some regards. So we did get feedback and also just own internal kind of fill checks on the cinder drop rates were feeling a bit slow in the PTR. So we just went back, reviewed it, and gathered our feedback and just iterated on the drop percentage to hit closer to the expectations of how much we want to be collecting the cinders and interacting with the tortured gifts. So I think we're in a much better spot. I know we're in a much better spot right now, actually. So that was one of the first major pieces coming out from the PTR.
A lot more chests from this, yeah?
Yeah, chests, more loot, more fun.
Awesome.
Let's see, next one. Yeah, so on the topic of more is more fun, the Baneful Hearts, we were noticing that they were dropping a bit inconsistently. So you can get the Baneful Hearts from opening tortured gifts, killing the Hellborn, and one of the Doomsayer variants, one of our new activity types. But again, we want to get the Baneful Hearts in the hands of the players with a pretty steady cadence. So we noticed with the PTR that we're just not getting them as frequently as we wanted to. So we just went back, iterated, and kind of reviewed our bad luck protection to just ensure that we improve the consistency that Baneful Hearts are dropping. And this is all kind of like
kurwa, loot filter. Czemu oni nie zaczną od podstaw tego, co jest potrzebne w takiej grze?
Highly ambitious piece of content that you only engage with like once every 50 levels. We want you getting the hearts. We want you engaging with the social boss summoning mechanic. And I think it just adds that extra layer to the Helltide we want you to engage with.
Kurwa, ja wczoraj piwka wszystkie wypiłem na sen.
Blood Maiden. Overall, like we touched on earlier, the Blood Maiden is receiving some overall rewards improvements. So, as noticed, or as mentioned before, if you contribute to the summon of the Blood Maiden, you receive a bonus reward. But one of the things was that you couldn't really tell. There is a little icon that appears like where your buff bar, but the effects of that was largely unnoticed. From both the team and so again, taking this opportunity to just review the overall value of the Blood Maiden for contributors and non-contributors alike. Because again, we wanted to make sure that she has a clear role in the Helltide experience. So again, overall, Blood Maiden is just overall more valuable. With this, we're dropping things like legendaries, Forgotten Soul, lore Zermats, and a % chance for contributors at the end world tiers to get some end game boss materials as well.
Nie, dobra, widzowie.
An additional
Sorry, pierdolę, to nie da się tego słuchać dalej.
Boss mats for the boss ladder.
Nie da.
Which we've heard a lot about how players were like, hey, we only really have one kind of method to get them, and we wanted to expand that and bring that into more avenues, so players have to just kind of be like tunneled off into one area.
Totalnie, Diablo 4 dead game.
Which is cool.
Yeah, variety is the spice of life.
Yes.
I like that the contribution encourages you to actually use these.
Mi się wydaje, że oni robią, słuchajcie, te developer update'y, bo to jest jedyna rzecz, która im podbija liczbę widzów. Diablo teraz ma 10 000 widzów, no nie? Po prostu z uwagi na to, że jest 10 kurwa streamerów, którzy im wykręcą wyniki i naśmiewają się z tego. Tylko, że 40% tego wyniku należy do kurwa Queena.
I remember I put a poll out on X.com. I put a poll out basically asking players what they believe the legendary drop rate of treasure goblins to be, and I had a whole bunch of options, and Like I think like 85% of the players were wrong. And because the drop rate at that time was 50%, players didn't feel it because they didn't see the treasure goblin enough to really notice that it was actually that high. So I think making sure that like we were like buffing up those moments where like,
Dobra, pierdolę to widzowie. Nie da się tego oglądać, to nie ma sensu. Skończmy oglądanie tego materiału o Tarkowie.